The late afternoon sun cast elongated shadows across the impeccably manicured lawn of the Harmon estate in the Hamptons. Seth Harmon stood at the edge of his limestone patio, a crystal tumbler of scotch in hand, observing the team of event staff applying the final touches to what would be his daughter Grace's engagement celebration. At 52, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a self-made man who had built Manhattan's most prestigious construction firm from nothing but sheer grit and vision. "Dad," Grace's voice carried across the lawn. She was radiant in a champagne-colored dress, her dark hair swept up elegantly. "The florists want to know where to place the additional arrangements." Seth smiled, gesturing toward the garden entrance. "Whatever your mother planned, sweetheart. This is your day." Bridget Harmon emerged from the house, her designer heels clicking against the limestone. At 47, she still turned heads, though Seth had begun to notice a hardness in her eyes that had not been there when they first met. She surveyed the preparations with the precision of a military commander. "The Carmichaels just called," she announced, not bothering to look at Seth. "They are running late. I told them we are starting precisely at 6, whether they are here or not." She turned to Grace. "Darling, go check on the place settings. The staff cannot seem to handle basic instructions." Grace hesitated, glancing at her father. Seth gave her a reassuring nod. "Go ahead. I am sure your mother knows best about these things." As Grace walked away, Seth's son, Marcus, emerged from the house, already looking uncomfortable in his tailored suit. At 24, he was the spitting image of Seth at that age, though lacking the hunger that had driven Seth to success. The Gleason vehicle had just arrived in the driveway, Marcus announced as he straightened his tie. "Paul mentioned he has some documents requiring your signature, Dad." Seth suppressed a frown. "Business can wait. This is your sister's special day." "It's merely a few signatures," Bridget interjected sharply. Paul explained these are routine property transfers. Better to handle them now before the guests begin arriving. Before Seth could formulate a response, Claire, his youngest daughter at 21, bounded down the patio steps. "Mom, Mrs. Patterson is inquiring about the seating arrangements again. She's insisting she cannot possibly sit at table 6. Bridget's meticulously maintained composure fractured slightly. "That woman," she muttered, stalking off toward the tent with Claire trailing behind her. Paul Gleason's arrival was heralded by the crunch of tires on the circular gravel driveway. Seth observed his attorney of 15 years emerge from his Mercedes, briefcase in hand. Paul's wife, Susan, followed, carrying a wrapped package that was undoubtedly more than merely an engagement gift. "Seth." Paul's voice boomed across the manicured lawn. He was a tall, distinguished-looking man with carefully styled silver hair and the kind of smile that had persuaded countless clients to entrust him with their legal affairs. "The place looks absolutely amazing." "Susan, doesn't it look amazing?" Susan Gleason, a quiet woman who had always seemed slightly apprehensive of her husband, nodded. "Wonderful. Simply wonderful." Paul clapped Seth on the shoulder, a gesture that had once felt fraternal but now struck Seth as somewhat presumptuous. "I've got those property transfers ready for your signature. Just routine documentation. Nothing that can't wait until after the party, of course." "Of course," Seth replied, noting how Paul's eyes flickered briefly toward Bridget, who was now admonishing a waiter about the champagne glasses. "Let's place the briefcase in my study for the time being." Inside the study, Paul set his briefcase upon the mahogany desk with practiced nonchalance. "Truly, Seth, it's just some standard paperwork. The deeds and property transfers, mostly. Perhaps we could complete it now while everything is quiet." Seth picked up a framed photograph from the desk, his attention momentarily captured by the captured memory. A photograph from his desk, Grace's college graduation. The entire family was smiling. It felt like a lifetime ago. "Paul, you have been my attorney for 15 years. More than that, you have been my friend. When did that change, Paul?" Paul's smile flickered almost imperceptibly. "I do not follow you well." Seth sat down. "The photo. Tonight is about Grace. We will discuss business on Monday." A flash of something, annoyance, fear, crossed Paul's face before his professional mask slipped back into place. Of course. Family first, always." The study door opened and Marcus entered. "Uncle Paul, Dad, Mom wants to know if you are done in here. Guests are starting to arrive." Paul's entire demeanor shifted as he turned to Marcus, and Seth noticed how his son's posture changed subtly, becoming more deferential. "Marcus, my boy, how is the legal internship treating you?" "It is amazing," Marcus gushed. "The partners say I am showing real promise." "That is because you have a natural gift," Paul replied, his tone almost paternal. "And good mentoring, of course." Seth watched this exchange with growing interest, filing away every nuance. "We should head out. Grace will want photos soon." The garden party was in full swing as the sun began its descent, casting a golden glow over the gathered guests. Seth moved through the crowd, playing the role of proud father and successful businessman. He accepted congratulations, discussed market trends with fellow CEOs, and kept one eye on his family's movements. He noticed how Bridget seemed to always know where Paul was, how their paths crossed just slightly too often to be coincidental. He observed Marcus hovering near Paul's social circle, laughing too loudly at the older man's jokes. Claire, usually so focused on her phone, kept glancing between her mother and Paul with what looked like nervous excitement. Mr. Harmon, one of the waiters, approached with a phone. "There is an urgent call from the Beijing office." Seth excused himself from a conversation about property values and headed toward the relative quiet of the rose garden. The call was brief, a minor crisis that his team could handle. But as he ended it, voices carried through the meticulously trimmed hedges. "Everything is going perfectly," Bridget's voice pitched low but clear in the evening air. Seth moved silently closer to the hedge, patient as ever. "My love," Paul's voice followed, accompanied by the unmistakable sound of a kiss. "We have been altering Seth's legal documents for years. The properties, the company shares, everything. In our names now." Seth's hand tightened on his phone, but he remained still, controlled. 25 years of high-stakes business deals had taught him the value of waiting for all the information before acting. "Dad, such an idiot." Marcus's voice joined them, and Seth's stomach clenched. Always so focused on his precious company, he never even noticed. "Our real dad. So clever." The voice was Claire's, and the betrayal was complete. "No one suspects anything. The Jensen property transfer is the last major piece," Paul said. "Once Seth signs those papers tonight, everything will be legally bulletproof. Another year of careful maneuvering, and we can finally drop the act." "I am tired of playing the perfect wife." Bridget's voice dripped with contempt. "Do you know what he said this morning? He actually thanked me for making our house a home, as if I haven't been plotting to destroy that home for years." "Patience, darling." Paul's voice was smug, assured. "Seth is brilliant with business. I will give him that. But he never understood that true power comes from controlling the legal framework. Every contract, every property deed, every corporate document. I have been quietly altering them all. By the time he realizes what has happened, it will be too late." "What about Grace?" Claire asked. "She actually loves Dad. She might cause problems." "Grace is too caught up in her own perfect little world to notice anything," Bridget dismissed. "Besides, once everything comes to light, she will." She had to choose between keeping her trust fund or remaining loyal to her father. In the end, money always wins. Seth had heard enough. He moved silently back toward the house, his mind already calculating, already planning. In his study, he accessed his private computer terminal, connecting to his estate security system. The cameras had been his own addition 3 years earlier, following a series of break-ins in the neighborhood. Bridget had complained about them being tacky, but she had eventually given up trying to have them removed. The footage appeared on his screen, months of midnight meetings in the garden, Paul arriving late at night when Seth was away on business, his own children sneaking documents in and out of his home office. Every betrayal was captured in high definition. His phone buzzed, a text from his head of cybersecurity, responding to his urgent request. "Multiple unauthorized access points detected in our system, all originating from PG's firm. Hundreds of altered documents found in backdated folders. Want me to lock everything down?" Seth typed back, "Monitor only. Document everything. Full report Monday." He stood at his study window, watching the party continue below. Grace was dancing with her fiancé, genuinely happy and unaware of the devastation brewing. Bridget was holding court with her social circle, playing the perfect corporate wife. Paul was chatting with board members, likely seeking more angles to exploit. Marcus and Player moved through the crowd, carrying their secrets like badges of honor. Seth pulled out his phone once more, dialing a number he hadn't used in years. "Marshall?" Seth Harmon, remember that favor you owe me? I need a forensic accountant's eyes on something, discreetly. Yes, it's urgent. No, don't send anyone to the office yet. I'll have everything ready for you Monday morning. He ended the call and took a moment to straighten his tie, checking his reflection in the window. The man looking back at him wasn't angry. He was focused, determined. They thought they had been clever. Cleverly using his own success against him, they twisted his trust into a weapon. They were about to learn why Seth Harmon had survived every attempt to dismantle his empire over the past 25 years. The party continued below, his family's betrayal hidden behind smiles and champagne toasts. Seth straightened his shoulders and headed back to play his role, the unsuspecting victim, the fool they believed him to be. For now, Monday would arrive soon enough. Seth, there you are. Grace's voice caught him at the bottom of the stairs. Daddy, it's time for your speech. He hugged his daughter, the only honest presence left in his household. Of course, sweetheart. Can't keep our guests waiting. As Seth walked toward the garden, he passed Bridget and Paul standing slightly too close together. Their confident smiles flickered as he approached. Everything all right, Seth? Paul asked, his tone solicitous. You seemed distracted earlier. Never better, old friend, Seth replied, his smile genuine, though not for the reasons they assumed. Never better. Monday morning arrived with the precision of a well-orchestrated plan. Seth Harmon sat in his corner office on the 48th floor of Harmon Tower, watching Manhattan stir to life below. The weekend's events had crystallized into cold determination, his mind clear and focused. His executive assistant knocked once before entering. Mr. Harmon, the State Bar Association's Ethics Committee is online, and Marshall Summers has arrived early. He's waiting in the conference room. Thank you, Janet. Hold all other calls. Seth picked up the phone, his voice measured and authoritative. Mr. Davidson, Seth Harmon. Thank you for taking my call on such short notice. The Ethics Committee chairman's voice crackled through the speaker. Your message mentioned evidence of serious misconduct by Paul Gleason. Given your position in the business community, we're treating this with utmost priority. I'm sending over documentation now. My team has compiled it. Evidence of systematic document alteration, fraudulent transfers, and egregious breaches of attorney-client privilege. Seth's mouse clicked through files as he spoke. You'll find video evidence, digital forensics, and a complete audit trail. A pause on the line as Davidson received the files. Then, my God, this is extensive, Mr. Harmon. This goes beyond simple misconduct. This is criminal conspiracy. I'm aware. I trust the Bar Association will handle this appropriately. We'll convene an emergency panel immediately. Mr. Gleason's license could be suspended by week's end, pending a full investigation. Seth ended the call and strode to the conference room. Marshall Summers, forensic accountant extraordinaire, sat surrounded by laptops and documentation. At 60, with wire-rimmed glasses and a prosecutor's demeanor, he had built his reputation by untangling the most complex financial frauds. Seth, Marshall stood, extending his hand. I've been reviewing the preliminary data since your call. This is sophisticated work. They've been building this trap for years. Show me. Marshall pulled up a series of diagrams on his laptop. Paul created a network of shell companies, all registered in your wife's maiden name or through proxy owners. Each time he handled a property transfer for your legitimate business, he created a shadow transaction. Seth studied the complex web of arrows and corporate entities. The gens and property, that would have been the crown jewel. Marshall pointed to a highlighted section. Sign those papers, and ownership of your entire commercial portfolio would have shifted to their control within 6 months. Clean, legal, and virtually irreversible without proving fraud, which is exactly what we're going to do. Seth's phone buzzed, a text from his head of cybersecurity. Full digital forensics complete. Found encrypted communications between PG and your wife dating back 5 years. All documented. Seth forwarded the message to Marshall. Add that to your evidence pile. I want. Everything was prepared for the board meeting. The morning had passed in a blur of intense, focused activity. By 1:30, Seth's executive team had assembled in the main boardroom. Paul Gleason's usual chair sat conspicuously empty. Ladies and gentlemen, Seth began, standing at the head of the table. What I am about to share will be disturbing. It will also explain why I have called for an immediate audit and the termination of all contracts with Gleason and Associates. The presentation was methodical and devastating. With each document revealed and each recording played, the board members' expressions shifted from confusion to shock, then to anger. This exposure puts us all at risk, Gerald Matthews, the head of legal compliance, stated flatly. Every contract Paul Gleon touched needs to be reviewed. Already in progress, Seth assured them. I have engaged Marshall Summers to lead the forensic audit. But there is more. He played the surveillance footage from his home, showing the midnight meetings and the conspiracies hatched in his own garden. Several board members visibly recoiled at the personal nature of the betrayal. My God, Seth, Tricia Chun, his longest-serving board member, whispered, your own family. Business first, Seth cut off any sympathy. I need unanimous board approval to sever all ties with Gleon and Associates and to initiate legal proceedings. The vote was immediate and unanimous. Across town, Paul Gleon sat in his corner office, unaware of the approaching storm. His secretary buzzed through. Mr. Gleon, the State Bar Association is here. They say it is urgent. Paul straightened his tie, confident in his ability to handle any legal challenge. That confidence evaporated as 3 stern-faced committee members entered, followed by 2 forensic IT specialists. Mr. Gleon, the lead investigator began. We have evidence of serious ethical violations and potential criminal conduct. We will need your computers and access to all client files. This is ridiculous, Paul blustered. On whose authority? We have documented proof of fraudulent document alteration, misuse of client trust accounts, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The investigator's voice was implacable. Your license is suspended, effective immediately, pending our investigation. Paul's law partners gathered in the conference room, watching through the glass walls as IT specialists began imaging his hard drives. Did you know about this, Thomas? Reynolds, the founding partner, demanded of the others. Any of it. Heads shook in mute denial. He has to go, Reynolds decided. Now, before this takes down the whole firm. In the Hamptons, Bridget Harmon was holding court at her weekly tennis club luncheon when her phone buzzed. The text from Paul sent ice through her veins. Bar Association here. They know everything. Seth knows. Delete everything now. Her hand trembled as she set down her mimosa. Around her, her social circle continued their mindless chatter about renovations and summer plans. Bridget, her friend Catherine, touched her arm. You've gone quite pale. I need to go. Bridget stood abruptly. Family emergency. She was halfway to her car when another text arrived, this one from Marcus. Mom, firm putting me on immediate leave. What's happening? Claire's text followed seconds later. Dad knows. Henderson Law School called about irregularities in my application. What do we do? Bridget's perfectly managed world was unraveling with terrifying speed. She tried calling Paul, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Her next call was to their private banker in the Cayman Islands. I'm sorry, Mrs. Harmon. The banker's accent was carefully neutral. Those accounts were closed last week. Mr. Harmon had full authorization. Bridget's manicured nails dug into her steering wheel. Paul had betrayed her. After all their careful planning, he'd taken the money and was probably planning to blame everything on her. Back at Harmon Tower, Seth received another update from his team. He allowed himself a small smile as he read the reports of Paul's suspension. Amid the turmoil engulfing his firm and the freezing of offshore accounts, his phone illuminated with Bridget's name. He allowed the call to proceed to voicemail. Grace appeared in the doorway of his office, her face pale, yet composed. Dad, can we talk? Seth motioned toward a chair. His daughter sat, her engagement ring catching the afternoon light. Thomas's parents saw the preliminary Bar Association report, she said quietly. They're concerned about the wedding. What do you want to do? Grace met his gaze directly. I want to know the truth. All of it. Seth retrieved a file and handed it to her. Read it. Take your time. Then decide. As Grace read, her composed expression crumbled. Mom and Paul all this time. And Marcus and Claire knew. Yes. The engagement party. They were using it as cover to get you to sign those documents. Yes. Grace's hands trembled as she closed the file. I'm postponing the wedding. Thomas understands. I can't celebrate while our family is torn apart like this. You're not responsible for their choices, Seth said firmly. I know. Grace stood, straightening her shoulders in a gesture so reminiscent of her father. I'm going to call Thomas's parents myself. They deserve to hear it from me." Seth watched her leave, pride mingling with his cold anger. At least one of his children had inherited his integrity. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Harmon, Mr. Summers has the complete forensic report ready for your review. Send him in." Marshall entered, carrying a thick binder and wearing a grim expression. "It's worse than we thought. Paul wasn't just helping your wife steal from you. He was skimming from every account he touched. The man's been running a sophisticated fraud scheme across multiple clients." "Perfect." Seth's smile was shark-like. "Send copies to the Bar Association and the District Attorney's Office." "Already done, Seth." Marshall hesitated. "Your wife's involvement is extensively documented. This will destroy her." "She destroyed herself," Seth replied, turning toward the window, his reflection hard and clear in the glass. "She remains unaware of what is to come, though the truth will inevitably find her." The remainder of the week unfolded with the precision of a flawlessly executed business strategy. Paul's law partners, desperate to salvage their firm's reputation, voted unanimously to remove him entirely. The Bar Association accelerated its investigation, unearthing further evidence with each passing day. Marcus was escorted from the law offices, his once promising career dissolving as the scandal intensified. Claire's acceptance to law school was rescinded, pending an inquiry into her involvement in the document fraud. Bridget's meticulously cultivated social circle began to disintegrate as details emerged. Her text messages grew increasingly frantic. "Seth, we must speak. Please allow me to explain. You are jeopardizing our children's futures." He left every message unanswered. Paul attempted to convene an emergency meeting with his partners, but they refused to see him. His access cards were deactivated, his emails rerouted, and his name had already been erased from the firm's website. In a final act of desperation, Paul arrived unannounced at Seth's office. "Mr. Gleason is here," Janet announced, her tone professional yet tinged with concern. "He is quite insistent." "Send him in." Paul stormed through the door, his usual composure fracturing. "Seth, be reasonable. We can reach an arrangement." Seth continued reviewing documents without glancing up. "Can we consider the children? Think of the scandal." Now Seth looked up, his gaze icy. "As you thought of them when you were sleeping with my wife? When you were instructing my son in how to commit fraud? When you assisted my daughter in falsifying her law school applications?" "It was not like that. Leave." Seth's voice could have frozen fire. "The next time I see you, it will be in a courtroom." Paul's face contorted with fury. "You self-righteous hypocrite. You believe you are so flawless, so removed from it all. Bridget sought me out because you were perpetually preoccupied with your precious company, too absorbed to notice her. And now, I will use that very company to dismantle you." Seth pressed his intercom. "Security. Please escort Mr. Gleason from the building permanently." As Paul was led away, Seth received one final text from his head of cybersecurity. "Found it. Offshore accounts emptied last week. All money transferred to a private account in PG's name only. Your wife got played." Seth allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. They had thought him a fool, too focused on business to see their betrayal. Now they would learn that business had taught him exactly how to handle traitors. The sun set over Manhattan, casting long shadows through Seth's office windows. In the growing darkness, he reviewed Marshall's final report, preparing for the next phase of his counterattack. There would be no compromise, no negotiation, no mercy. They had chosen their path. Now they would face the consequences. The State Bar Association's hearing room fell silent as the final verdict was read. Paul Gleason, once one of Manhattan's most respected attorneys, stood rigid as his career crumbled with each measured word from the Ethics Committee chairman. In light of overwhelming evidence of systematic fraud, document falsification, and gross violations of attorney-client privilege, this committee hereby orders the immediate and permanent disbarment of Paul Gleason. All documents bearing his signature over the past 5 years are subject to automatic review and potential nullification. Seth Harmon sat in the back row, watching his former friend's shoulders sag. His new legal team, headed by Alexander Torres from Wagner and Mitchell, was already making notes on their tablets. "Every fraudulent transfer will be reversed," Torres whispered. "The disbarment gives us unprecedented leverage." Paul turned, his eyes meeting Seth's. The mask of sophisticated charm had cracked, revealing the desperate man beneath. Seth held his gaze, unmoved by the silent plea he saw there. Outside the hearing room, reporters clustered like vultures. Paul pushed through them, ignoring questions about client losses and criminal charges against his former law partners had already distanced themselves, settling with Seth rather than risk their firm's complete destruction. Seth's phone buzzed with a message from his forensic team. They had found a hidden partition on Paul's laptop containing evidence of systematic embezzlement from his own firm. They were sending the details to the district attorney's office immediately. The next few weeks unfolded with the precision of a military campaign. Seth's new legal team moved swiftly, leveraging Paul's disbarment to unwind years of fraudulent transfers. Properties, company shares, and assets flowed back into their rightful accounts. In their Hamptons mansion, Bridget received the divorce papers with trembling hands. Her attorney, a third-rate lawyer, since no top firm would touch her case, looked grim. "Mrs. Harmon, I must be frank. The evidence against you is overwhelming. Mr. Harmon's team has documented your role in every fraudulent transfer. You're facing potential criminal charges." "But the offshore accounts," Bridget began. "They're empty." The lawyer shuffled uncomfortably. "Mr. Gleon cleared them out last month. The funds were traced to a private account in his name, then disappeared." Bridget's perfectly maintained facade cracked. "That bastard. After everything we planned." "Mrs. Harmon," her lawyer cut in sharply. "I advise against finishing that sentence. Let's focus on damage control." Marcus and Claire sat in Seth's office the following day, both looking considerably less polished than usual. Marcus's designer suit couldn't hide his haunted expression. Claire's law school dreams lay in ruins. "Henderson Law has officially rescinded my acceptance," Claire said, her voice small. They said involvement in document fraud makes me unfit for legal education. The firm's ethics committee is reviewing my internship," Marcus added. "I'll never pass the character and fitness review for the bar exam now." Seth studied his children, seeing not the confident conspirators from the garden party, but two scared individuals facing the consequences of their actions. Young adults faced the consequences of their choices. "You both made your decisions," he said evenly. "You chose Paul over your father. You helped destroy your family for a man who is probably halfway to Mexico by now." As if on cue, his phone lit up with a news alert. Disgraced attorney Paul Gleon spotted boarding private plane to Mexico City. Claire burst into tears. Marcus slumped in his chair. "Dad, please," Marcus began. "We were stupid. We thought." "You thought betraying me was clever?" Seth cut him off. "You thought Paul's plan was foolproof. You thought wrong." He pulled 2 folders from his desk drawer. "These are the consequences of your choices. You can accept them, or you can earn a second chance." The siblings exchanged glances before opening the folders. Inside each was a detailed program: ethics courses, community service requirements, and strict conditions for future education funding. "This is your one opportunity for redemption," Seth continued. "Complete these requirements, prove you have learned from this disaster, and I will consider supporting your education again. Fail, and you are on your own." Grace knocked on the door, entering when Seth nodded. Unlike her siblings, she carried herself with quiet dignity. "The Hendersons send their regards," she said. "They understand postponing the wedding. Thomas still wants to move forward when the time is right." Seth allowed himself a small smile. "You are the only one who maintained your integrity, Grace. I am proud of you." Marcus and Claire could not meet their sister's eyes. Across town, Bridget's social circle was evaporating faster than summer rain. The scandal had spread through Manhattan's elite like wildfire, fueled by the salacious details of her affair and fraud. "I simply cannot see you at the charity gala," Catherine, her former tennis partner, said over the phone. "You understand, of course, the optics." One by one, invitations were rescinded. Her country club membership was temporarily suspended. Calls went unanswered. Then came the news that shattered her last hope of salvaging anything from the wreckage. Paul had emptied their offshore accounts days before fleeing to Mexico. "He played us all," she whispered to her reflection in the powder room mirror. The face that looked back was older, harder, stripped of its careful polish by betrayal and fear. Her phone buzzed with a text from Paul's Mexican number. "Sorry, darling. Business is business, you understand." They were the same words she had once used to justify betraying Seth. Seth received the news of Paul's flight with characteristic calm. His security team was already coordinating with Mexican authorities, tracking Paul's movements through camera footage and financial transactions. He's staying at a luxury resort in Cabo, his head of security reported, living large on the stolen funds. Not for long, Seth replied. Contact our friends at the FBI. Remind them about those wire fraud charges. 1 month later, Paul's Mexican paradise crumbled as federal agents surrounded his beachfront villa. The extradition process began immediately, fueled by the mountain of evidence Seth's team had compiled. Back in New York, the divorce proceedings moved forward with ruthless efficiency. Bridget's attempts to secure a favorable settlement collapsed under the weight of Seth's evidence. Mrs. Harmon, the judge stated firmly, given your documented role in this conspiracy, you're fortunate we're only discussing civil matters today. The criminal charges are another matter entirely. Bridget left the courthouse with nothing but a modest settlement, enough to maintain an apartment in Queens, far from her former social circles. Her phone remained silent, her former friends too busy distancing themselves from her disgrace. 1 year later, Seth stood at the window of his expanded office in the renamed Harmon International Tower. The scandal had ultimately strengthened his empire. His ruthless handling of the betrayal had become a legend in business circles. Grace entered the room, her demeanor radiating happiness and a sense of centered calm. Her wedding plans were firmly back on track, and the delay had only served to strengthen her resolve and perspective. She reminded him that the Harmon Foundation's inaugural ethics symposium was scheduled for the following week, noting that law schools had expressed particular interest in utilizing their case study. Seth nodded thoughtfully. The Harmon Foundation for Corporate Ethics had risen from the ashes of betrayal, transforming personal anguish into a driving professional purpose. When asked about Marcus and Claire, Grace reported that Claire's community service at the legal aid office was gradually reshaping her outlook. Marcus, she added, was grappling with the ethics curriculum but remained determined in his efforts. Grace reflected that they seemed, at last, to comprehend the magnitude of what they had lost. As for his mother, Grace's expression tightened slightly. She was now living in Queens and working as a receptionist. Paul's guilty plea had done little to aid her social rehabilitation. That morning, the news had broken. Paul Gleason, extradited from Mexico and confronted with overwhelming evidence, had pleaded guilty to multiple felony charges. His attempt to shift all blame onto Bridget had backfired spectacularly when Seth's team exposed his embezzlement from his own firm. Seth turned from the window, his gaze resting on the empire he had built and fiercely defended. The betrayal had cost him a wife and 2 children, yet he emerged stronger, wiser, and more respected than ever before. Trust must be earned, he murmured, recalling the garden party that had set everything in motion. And betrayal must be answered with the full force of the law. Grace rested a gentle hand on his arm. You taught us all that lesson, Dad, she said softly. Some of us learned it better than others. Seth allowed himself a faint smile. The price of justice had been steep, but he had paid it without hesitation or regret. In the end, integrity had proven stronger than betrayal, and truth more powerful than deception. As the sun set over Manhattan, casting long shadows through the office windows, Seth Harmon stood in the gathering twilight, unchanged, unbowed, unbroken, and ultimately victorious. 5 years had passed since the scandal that had shaken Manhattan's elite circles. The International Tower continued to dominate the skyline, its gleaming facade a testament to Seth Harmon's resilience and power. At 57, Seth had not only recovered from the betrayal, but had transformed it into an empire twice as strong. That morning, the Wall Street Journal's headline read, Harmon International acquires major European construction firm. Seth Harmon's $4.8 billion deal cements global dominance. Seth read the article in his expanded office on the 50th floor, which now occupied the entire level. The Harmon Foundation for Corporate Ethics occupied 3 floors below, its programs having educated over 1,000 executives and law students about business integrity. His intercom buzzed. Mr. Harmon, Grace is here with the wedding venue photos. Grace entered, now a poised 30-year-old woman who had become her father's trusted advisor while maintaining her own successful career in corporate compliance. Her wedding to Thomas, delayed but not destroyed by the scandal, was finally approaching. The Southampton venue is perfect, she said, spreading photos across his desk. Small, elegant, family only. She paused. I haven't invited Mom. Seth nodded. The mention of Bridget no longer carried any emotional weight. Their paths had diverged completely after the divorce. Her fall from grace was as total as his rise had been meteoric. Have you heard the latest about her? Grace asked carefully. Seth raised an eyebrow. You know, I don't follow that part of our history. She's working as a receptionist at a small dental office in Queens, living in a one-bedroom apartment, using her maiden name. Catherine ran into her at a discount grocery store last week, said she looked old. The mighty Bridget Harmon, once the queen of Manhattan society, had found her new level. Her attempts to rebuild her social connections had failed spectacularly. Every door that had once welcomed her remained firmly closed, her former friends treating her like a cautionary tale. Her last attempt at social resurgence had ended in quiet humiliation. Redemption had arrived 2 years prior when she attempted to join a charitable organization in Queens. The background check uncovered her involvement in the fraud scheme, and her application was quietly denied. Paul Gleason's fate had unfolded with even greater drama. After his extradition from Mexico and subsequent guilty plea, he was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. His disbarment was permanent, his reputation lay in ruins, and his assets were seized. Sources close to Seth reported that Paul was struggling to adapt to prison life. His refined manners and air of arrogance made him a target. The man who once commanded respect in Manhattan courtrooms now spent his days in protective custody, his only visitors being his increasingly exasperated legal team. Did you see the notice from the Bar Association? Grace asked, pulling out her tablet. They're using Paul's case as required reading for ethics certification. The Harmon Foundation actually contributed to the curriculum. Seth allowed himself a small smile. Justice had its own poetry. Marcus and Claire had taken divergent paths after their fall from grace. Marcus, after completing mandated ethics courses and community service, abandoned law entirely. He now worked in construction management for one of Seth's subsidiaries, starting from the bottom and gradually earning respect through genuine effort rather than nepotism. Marcus, Grace mentioned, his team completed the Boston project under budget. He's actually good at this, Dad, better than he ever was at law. Claire had taken longer to find her footing. The rescinded law school acceptance had shattered her confidence, but the required volunteer work at Legal Aid had given her a new perspective. She now operated a nonprofit dedicated to assisting victims of white-collar crime, partially funded by the Harmon Foundation, but functioning independently. Claire's organization is partnering with 3 more universities, Grace continued. She's turned her mistake into something meaningful. The significance of their redemption had been profound and hard-won. Seth had maintained rigorous conditions for his renewed support, complete transparency, regular ethics training, and clear performance metrics. They had learned that trust, once broken, could only be rebuilt through consistent, deliberate action. The door opened once more, and Alexandra Torres entered. She had become Seth's chief legal counsel after leading the team that dismantled Paul Gleason's fraudulent empire. The European acquisition is complete, she reported, and you'll appreciate this. We just acquired Paul Gleason's old law firm's building. The partners finally accepted our offer. The irony was exquisite. Paul's former law partners had never recovered from the scandal. Their once prestigious firm had imploded, torn apart by internal investigations and client departures. The building would be renovated and transformed into the Harmon Foundation's new headquarters. Have the foundation send them an invitation to our next ethics symposium, Seth suggested, his voice carrying a note of satisfied amusement. Alexandra smiled sharply. Already done. They declined, citing prior commitments. A text message appeared on Seth's phone from his head of security, who still maintained surveillance on key figures from the scandal. BH attempted to access her old country club membership, claimed it was a misunderstanding when rejected, and left in tears. PG requested a prison transfer again, denied, claims harassment from other inmates who lost money in his scheme. Seth archived the message without comment. Their suffering brought him no pleasure. It was simply the natural consequence of their choices. Thomas Henderson, Grace's fiancé, arrived for their lunch appointment. At 32, he had proven his loyalty during the scandal, standing by Grace despite his family's initial concerns. Now a partner in his father's investment firm, he had earned Seth's respect through his integrity. Sir, Thomas greeted Seth warmly. The foundation's impact report is impressive. Our firm is implementing the ethics training program company-wide. Over lunch in Seth's private dining room, they discussed the upcoming wedding. Grace had chosen to hold it at the same Hamptons estate where the betrayal had been discovered, a decision that spoke to her resilience. The rose garden has been redesigned, Grace mentioned. No more hedges. Seth nodded, remembering that night 5 years ago. The garden where he had overheard their conspiracy had been transformed into an open space filled with flowers, leaving no more hidden corners for secret meetings. Later that afternoon, Seth visited the Harmon Foundation offices. The walls were lined with case studies, including a detailed analysis of Paul Gleason's downfall titled The Price of Betrayal: Ethics, Trust, and Consequences in Corporate Law. The foundation's executive director, a former federal prosecutor, updated him on their latest initiatives. We've had requests from law schools across the country. Your story has become the definitive case study in professional ethics. Any word from Henderson Law School? Seth asked, thinking of Claire's rescinded acceptance. They've adopted our full curriculum. Their dean specifically cited the Gleason case as a turning point in their ethics education. The day's final meeting was with his expanded board of directors. The company had tripled in size since the scandal, with Seth's decisive handling of the crisis having attracted investors impressed by his integrity and strength. The European acquisition makes us the largest construction firm in the Western Hemisphere, his CFO reported. Our ethical business practices have become a major selling point. After the meeting, Seth worked late into the evening, reviewing reports and planning future expansions. His empire had been built on skill and transformed by betrayal into something even stronger. A news alert popped up on his screen. Former Society Queen Bridget Carlton, formerly Harmon, denied loan application. Sources confirmed. Credit ruined by fraud charges. In her tiny Queen's apartment, Bridget stared at her reflection in a cheap mirror, barely recognizing the woman she had become. Her designer clothes were long gone, replaced by off-the-rack basics. Her once perfect manicure was now self-maintained, and her hair showed strands of gray she could no longer afford to color professionally. Her phone, no longer the latest model, displayed a message from her current lawyer. Petition to modify divorce settlement denied. Judge cited ongoing evidence of fraud participation. She had tried dating, but background checks in the digital age were thorough. Every potential relationship had ended when her past emerged. The wealthy men she had once attracted now avoided her like poison. In the federal prison protective custody unit, Paul Gleason sat alone in his cell. The former attorney had aged decades in 5 years. His polished charm had been replaced by bitter anger. His appeals had been denied, his sentence upheld, his disbarment permanent. His last remaining asset, his elegant Manhattan apartment, had been seized and sold to cover victim restitution. The final insult: it had been purchased by a Harmon International subsidiary. Marcus visited the construction site of his latest project, proudly wearing a hard hat with his team leader, Mitch. He had discovered a talent for actual work, earning respect through competence rather than connections. Mr. Harmon, his crew called him, none of them knowing or caring about his relationship to the company's founder. He preferred it that way. Claire hosted a seminar for fraud victims, her own experience lending authenticity to her guidance. Her organization had helped hundreds of families recover from white-collar crimes. Her past mistakes had been transformed into a mission. In the Hamptons estate, Grace reviewed wedding plans with her future mother-in-law. Their relationship had grown stronger for having weathered the scandal together. The Henderson family had come to admire her loyalty and resilience. In the crucible of crisis, integrity endured. From his office towering above Manhattan, Seth Harmon watched the city's lights awaken as evening descended. The betrayal intended to shatter him had instead unveiled his deepest fortitude. His commercial empire now stood vaster, his reputation more resilient, his legacy irrevocably secured. Upon his desk rested a framed inscription, placed there in the wake of scandal. Trust must be earned, but betrayal must be answered with the full force of the law. This had become the Harmon family's renewed creed, a testament that integrity was not merely a moral quality, but a power capable of reshaping destinies. Those who betrayed him had sought to plunder his empire. Instead, they had unwittingly aided him in founding a dynasty. As the sun dipped below the Manhattan skyline, It cast elongated shadows through Seth's office windows. Amid the gathering dusk, he studied blueprints for his next corporate acquisition. The past had been settled, justice had prevailed. Before him, the future unfurled, radiant with promise. Though trust, once fractured, can never be wholly reclaimed, the wisdom forged in the fires of betrayal can erect something far grander than what was lost. Seth Harmon had mastered that truth, as had all who had ever underestimated him. And so our narrative draws to a close. We welcome your reflections in the comments. Thank you for your time. If this story resonated with you, we invite you to subscribe to this channel. Select the video displayed on your screen, and we shall meet again there.